Well, I think it's in the new generation, we've got to set a standard of heart that these kids can understand because they're not getting it at all.
Well, I think a lot of our need for ceremony is actually being played out in the athletic fields, and that's good. I'm all for athletics. Dan and I are both big sports fans, but it is a competitive paradigm. Somebody always loses. Now we could benefit from not dismissing that or getting rid of that, but having a collaborative paradigm where everybody gets to experience the success and the winning, as opposed to just somebody wins and somebody loses every day. So I'm not against the competitive environment at all, but I would love to see more emphasis placed on a collaborative paradigm.
Yeah. Well, even children are not learning how to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it's in the business world. It's so dog eat dog, so competitive, that I think that there's another area there where people need to learn some new tools.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Tell us more about stress reduction. There must be tremendous stress in this type of older consciousness that's evolved that we're talking about today. I think that's why there's so much illness, really.
Yes.
They're not even in their complete body to hear the body expressing itself.
Right.
But it's paying a high price, isn't it?
Right. There. I can't remember how recently this is. In the last several years, there was a study done that identified the cost of stress in American business.
Yes.
$300 billion a year with a B. That's a lot of lost productivity and a lot of illness in the workplace. So stress is real. I mean, it really occurs, and it's because people don't know how to stop and go inside when they're upset, when something's going on that they don't know how to deal with.
Right.
And taking a moment in self-reflection and allowing themselves, we use the practice of remembrance that Paul described, to allow you to come inside in that moment and be with, the upsetness of that moment, and bring in some positive energy through the practice of remembrance that will begin to dissipate that stress.
Could that concept work with fear?
Absolutely.
It seems
My
to
favorite
me,
emotion.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the big one out there right now, and it would seem to me, instead of avoiding it, to go inside and start getting in touch with the truth of what you're really feeling. Tell yourself the truth, but be writing it down so you can actually see the disturbance in the field, because it's big. Because it's going to keep coming back and coming back,
Right.
and it can have a lot of control.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we have a lot of clients that have found our approach very helpful with stress, and specifically what we do, stress comes to people when they have a belief about their future that is compromised. Something is subtly telling them that their future is diminished, their future options are minimal. And when we can pinpoint exactly what that thought is about their future that's kind of compromised, and then we can have them re-examine, is that really true, and or bring the remembrance, the positive energy from the remembrance into that. That futuristic prediction actually it goes away, it vanishes, and then they feel full again of possibility, and all of a sudden the stress has dropped away. So that's our coaching model is built around helping people find their subtle beliefs about the future that are not very attractive and debilitating.
I believe that they have the answers, and that you just give them the platform in which to explore, and they will know what is their truth. I mean, when I went through hypnotherapy school, we were learning these type of techniques of asking people the right questions while they're in a very, very relaxed state. And, effectively, even the voice as a teacher and your presence can put someone into a more relaxed place, and then in trusting themselves and going in there and sharing that and not being afraid to share that, and then looking at their options, because a lot of it's illusion. All of it, most likely.
Yes.
Well, there are some legitimate fears that people might have, but they also have choice, and they forget that they have a power in choice.
Right. Now imagine the world where people in leadership positions were making decisions from that centered, balanced place,
Yes.
as opposed to the stressed out, fearful, angry, lost heart, resigned place. This would be a completely different world that we live in.
A different society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what's possible.
Well, maybe we should clone you guys and put you out there in the thousands, and I could be, you know, sort of like a cop directing.
We're
all
trying
kinds
to
of
teach as many people as possible.
That's right, yeah. We'd like them to fish, not have us give them the food.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You both must have some very empowering stories of people that you've changed their life. Let's start with you, Dan. Can you give me a story?
Oh boy, there's a lot of them. Well, we were talking about fear. I have a client who is in the engineering business, and the client base that he worked with was extremely demanding, and he would get really upset when the project managers that he was dealing with would change the game and refuse to pay for add-ons as the scope of these projects
Yeah.
would creep out, right?
Yeah.
And so the owner of this business that I was working with would go in and he'd get battered by this one particular client. And what he interpreted that to mean was that he was a coward. So he walked around in fear, and he bought
Wow.
that story.
Yeah.
And then he was unable to go in and ask for what was rightfully fair compensation for the work he was providing to a bunch of his other clients, which just reinforced the fact that he was ineffective and he was cowardly. So when we started to work with that, and we peeled back that onion and got down to the lower layer, and he realized that he was buying into this coward story that was the reason why he never was going to be successful. That was this dire fate that he was facing that had him losing heart, and he was ready to sell his business, actually.
Wow.
But once he got in touch with who he really was underneath that, this ethical, competent, caring businessman who really took great care of his clients and had every right to expect to get paid, and that he had this one interaction with this one client that was very, very difficult for him and abusive, really.
Well, I was going to say, that sounds
Yeah.
very abusive and manipulative.
So he found the courage inside himself, which was there all the time anyway, through the practice of remembrance, and to go in deeper and really get to the bottom of what he was buying into, and realized that that wasn't true at all. And he went in and he had this very powerful conversation in a very respectful way with this client. He did not get paid. He fired the client, and he began to realize that he didn't want that client anyway.
He didn't want that client anyway.
Over the course of a year, his business quadrupled after he did that.
Yeah. That's inspirational.
Very inspirational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. How about you, Paul? You must have a...
I have a few.
Well,
One of my
we've got a little
favorite
bit of
ones.
time here.
One of
Let's
my
talk
favorite
about it.
ones is just last year. A really brilliant scientist founded a company, and it had grown to 30 people or more. And he realized after a while that he shouldn't really be running this company. It was not his gift to run the company. He wanted to do his science, and he turned the job over to one of his colleagues that was working in the company.
Yeah.
She was a brilliant woman as well, and she was a perfect CEO. She was doing a great job. He was now just a scientist, owner, but
Doing his passion.
she was the boss.
Yeah.
She set the agendas for the meetings and so on. So his problem ended up being that when he didn't know what was going on, when he couldn't imagine how she was running the company, he would get scared, and he would start to take the conversation and go off into different directions which weren't counterproductive. And he believed that he was going to look stupid. And so, her problem was that every time he took the conversation off in a different direction, she got frustrated and felt like, God, I've got to take special, tender, loving care of this guy. And so both of them were in this limited, view of what was possible between them, and they would fight and argue, and it was not healthy and not productive. When I helped them see their own role in this, dynamic, and see that neither of them had any mischievous intentions, but that he was not, ever looking stupid, and she didn't have to give him special, tender, loving care. They actually learned how to, really deeply trust each other, because he trusted her to give her the company's CEO role, but he hadn't fully let go, and he didn't want to let go of the control or all the, the say-so. And when he was able to do that, he literally, he literally cried tears of happiness, because he now felt that he'd been able to fully give her that role and not worry about the fact that he didn't know what was going on about everything, and he never looked stupid.
I would imagine that you guys are also teaching communication skills, because it sounds like in some of the examples that you've used that they couldn't communicate what they weren't in touch with.
Exactly.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And once they found what they were, what was their truth, the next step is now how do you communicate that? And that's a gift to be able to give that to someone.
Right. It's very powerful when people see that little belief that they are buying into, that's subtle, maybe unconscious, but it's driving them crazy.
It's the driver.
Yeah, it's a driving them crazy thought that keeps people unhappy and stressed out and ineffective.
Well, it's interesting. You know, I've been doing a lot of therapy with people for 25 years, or consulting is probably a better word. And most of them, 3/4 of them, could not say no. Did not know how to say no. Boundaries are a problem. I would imagine some of the things that are going on in low self-esteem in the private sector is happening in the corporate structure too. It's a transference
Sure.
that's going in there.
Right.
What do you guys say to somebody like somebody that you're interviewing and wants to hire you to come in, and you give them the idea about the heart in the corporate, and they say that won't work? What's your comeback?
Well, one could be, you know, how's what you're doing now working for you? You know, it's the famous consultant question, right?
How's it working for you?
And, you know, we can, through this process that we have, we can help people self-identify this, what we call the cycle of separation that they have created for themselves. This world, you know, you've talked about create your own reality. That's the name of this program, and people do create their own reality, and so we get to help them identify the reality that they've created, and that it is a creation, it is illusion, and when they see that, it's, you know, they're able to go, oh, well, maybe there is something to this, and they can open to it, and when they get some relief, then they're willing to take the next step and the next step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is something that's happened in the years, Paul, that you've been consulting that was probably one of your more difficult situations that you yourself said, okay, there's no way I'm going to get through to this person from their perception, belief system, or whatever? Have you ever had somebody that, a company you've had to walk away because they just don't get it?
Sure. Yeah, we are not, you know, perfectly matched every company and every person in our society. So that does happen. You're looking for a specific example? Like that's a really
well, I wonder how
tough one.
What you did with it, what you realized in the situation, and how you took care of yourself. Give us a little
Sure.
about that.
I mean, in a recent example, I have a very, what I would say is a mainstream business. They're not a spiritually oriented business at all. The owners asked me to come in and help them with a key player who actually is a very religious man, but his religious, you know, kind of belief system helps, it's a little bit twisted, and he gets a little righteous, and he wants to hold people accountable for not, you know, doing what they're supposed to do, and it's almost like a righteous, you know,
blame
accountability.
and judgment.
And it's causing morale issues. The owners, you know, they're having a great time. They want to go out and, you know, party, and, you know, they're not. So there's this big disconnect between a key player and the two owners. And so what I helped them do is kind of understand one another a little better, so that they could, you know, find the happy medium in
Boy,
between.
that's tall order.
And it was a tough order. And what I did is I went inside and I said, so why am I here? You know, I asked, so what am I supposed to help these guys with? And you know, I have a history of, in my distant past, I used to be a party guy too, and so I could actually relate to the owners who wanted to go out and party. And on the other hand, I'm a very spiritual guy like this fellow who, you know, wants to bring his spirituality into this workplace. So I could actually kind of relate to both sides and help them understand one another. And you know, after about 4 meetings, you know, they really just started talking and being people, and it was a, you know, a healthy conversation as opposed to an uptight, stressed out, and or not having the real conversation. And a lot of our work is to help people have the real conversations that they don't want to have unless there's somebody there to kind of make it safe for everybody.
Well, they want to be seen. They want to be heard.
Right.